It's Mark and Pete.
Hello and welcome to the show. More colourful conversations with Mark and Pete. And this is the show dedicated to religion, politics and business. Now on this week's show we take a different tack and we ask a simple question. Can we shake off Shakespeare? Well, William Shakespeare is known not just throughout the United Kingdom, but throughout the globe. Yes, this is the man who was the poet, the playwright, and indeed entrepreneur, putting on many a plays throughout England and in many other places too. But what is his relevance today? It seems that wherever we go, whether at school, whether we switch on the television, whether we pick up the newspaper, we seem to have quotes from Shakespeare, influence from Shakespeare. In some cases, people actually see him as being an iconic figure, almost a religious figure. Yes. Well, with me today is clergyman Pete. Yes. So, Pete, what do you think of the Bard of Avon?
Well, Mark, what a businessman, Mark, should I say? What I would say is there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 2. And I say that not because I think of thinking Shakespeare is particularly bad, or particularly good for that matter, but rather because we find that if you try and think of a quote and a rather pretentious sounding quote, usually it is Shakespeare that you're quoting.
Yes.
He's infected, or shall we say affected, well, probably both, the English language to such an extent that a lot of things we say trace their way back to Shakespeare. So what I think is, for good or bad, he has made his way into being part of English culture, British culture, and part of the English language. So you can't escape him. But
No.
I do think, in my personal opinion, he's a bit overrated.
Well, I have a slightly different view on this matter in the sense that I believe that he certainly has shaped a lot of people's thinking. And we'll go back to the beginning here because Shakespeare himself, he was born in 1564 and died in 1616. Now, he actually then lived for a reasonable age of 52, but strangely enough, he came to a rather untimely demise. Basically, after a heavy drinking session with his fellow playwright, Ben Jonson. So when we think of somebody like William Shakespeare, we think of somebody being very literate, very creative, and yet it was deemed that he was a bit of a brawler, a bit of a person who revelled and indulged in all the luxuries of life. He became very wealthy as a result of putting on plays. He also before he actually died, actually gave some rather scary little words for his own epitaph, which we'll talk about in a minute. Because there's a lot of debate over really who was William Shakespeare, and we will explore this in a lot more depth. But I'm going to sort of set up my thoughts here about William Shakespeare with a little poem called Bamboozled by the Bard. Some say it's hard to understand the bard. His works leave children mentally scarred with wherefores and wherefore thou art. Their little brains don't know where to start. Remember at school the pain we underwent. Now is the winter of our discontent. He once said all the world's a stage. Well, perhaps it's time to burn the page. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? No, the sloppy sentiment brings dismay. Don't tell her she is a rose by any other name. Tell her straight she's just fair game. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Well, maybe it's time for 40 winks. These words are razors to my wounded heart. This language used is like a black art. To thee, thy, and verily me, forsooth, we beseech all three. Till then and now and past tense, why does Shakespeare make little sense? So, well, I remember at school having to pore over all of these books and poems and even enact some of these plays. And I kept thinking to myself, I can't relate to this one bit.
No.
So I think the point here is what is the relevance of Shakespeare today?
Yeah, it's strange that he has become so unassailable in his position as the playwright, and I suppose the poet as well, at the top of the tree. And it's interesting to trace. You can trace how this developed, and it was not always so. He was, well, I think, pretty much well regarded from when he was at the height of his career onwards. He was seen as a talented playwright, but he wasn't seen as being this iconic figure, as you referred to him earlier, or as being so good that you weren't allowed to criticise him. He wasn't seen as that good. He was seen as a good playwright. He was seen as a good poet, but there were others.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, and this developed. You can see. So he was around in the early 17th century. So then that's how he was seen. But as you go on into the 18th and then the 19th centuries, his reputation develops. It's until you get to the end of the 19th century, and he's regarded as almost like a deity. He's so brilliant.
Well,
in fact, I think it was George Bernard Shaw called this attitude towards Shakespeare bardolatry. Like idolatry, bardolatry, and it's. I don't understand it because I don't see him as being that good, but also because there's the barrier of the language now being so out of date. If it's performed, you can't understand it anymore. No. So even if he is as good as they say, isn't it now time to move on?
Well, indeed, but let's just pose a few points here, which was really William Shakespeare the William Shakespeare that we've been talking about? For example, many people think he was just a fraud. For example, a front for other writers. So there has been perhaps some conspiracy theorists that actually it was the works of Francis Bacon or Christopher Marlowe, possibly even Edward de Vere, people like that who were writing at the time, scholars who maybe actually were very good, but basically thought, well, they could stretch their brand by fronting it with the brand of William Shakespeare. It seemed to be quite a clever way of putting on plays or getting things published. So was he really one man? Or was it just an amalgamation of other people's work? So that's one question. I mean, this has never really been proven because when we actually look at evidence, although we have seen William Shakespeare's signature, ironically, he has actually, and this is a point of fact, and there are very few original signatures of William Shakespeare, but they do vary. So, for example, we say William Shakespeare, but actually that's how we call him today. That's not how he spelt his name at the time.
No.
So we actually pronounce it William Shakespeare. So that's Shakes and then Peare. But if you look at some of the transcripts and where there have been evidence of handwriting from William Shakespeare, he's very inconsistent. And I think that's something, again, that is something that's a bit mysterious. And I think that the other thing, which is a bit of mystery, is around, I made reference earlier in the programme, which is about his epitaph, the words. This is something that does take on a slightly sinister feel. Now, he's buried in Stratford-upon-Avon, in a particular church, and one of the things where he's laid to rest is a stone, which has these following words: "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear, to dig the dust enclose here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones."
Yes.
So effectively, do not disturb this grave.
Yes.
Now, why would that be the case? Why would he do something like that? And more importantly, why would he even reference Jesus?
Oh, well, yes, that's interesting that he was a member of the Church of England. In his plays, there were biblical references. There's not an actual biblical story, but he references, quotes from the Bible, quotes from the Book of Common Prayer, the standard prayer book of the Church of England, still used widely today. But I suspect that it was simply that at that time in England, Christianity and that particular form of Christianity was the culture. I mean, that's in the same way as in certain areas of the world now, in certain areas of cities today, rap is the culture, and you can make references by referring to different rap records. Or today, you could maybe make references and be talking, and you'd be talking almost. You can have a whole conversation just in quotes from movies, and in the same way he would quote the Bible. However, it does seem to have gone deeper than that, because if you do, as many of us have had to do, study his plays, you see that he was making some meaningful points. So
yes,
it's not certainly you can't say from what he said that he was a Christian in the sense that he truly believed that he accepted Christ as his Lord. But he had some understanding of Christianity, and he would make references to Jesus because Christianity was the culture. So yes. I don't think we can read too much into that. But however, it seems mysterious, doesn't it? And the story about him, his plays being written by someone else, which seems to me to have only grown up. I mean, just looking at it, it seems to me it's grown up as his reputation of being some sort of unassailably brilliant person grew up. So this idea that, it couldn't have been him then. But if you bring it back to, actually, he's good, but there are others that are good, you don't need the conspiracy theory to explain him. So I think the two, my personal opinion is that the two go together. But still, it still doesn't matter, because actually to us now, it doesn't really matter whether it was him or not. It's the body of work that we have. And Shakespeare, whether he's the real Shakespeare or it's some, combination figure, that actually adds to the mystique. So there's the fact that he's seen of as absolutely brilliant. There's the fact that he makes these religious comments which have deep and sometimes worrying meanings. There's the humor, the jolly nature of some of the plays, although we don't necessarily get the jokes these days. That they're still lively, and of course they're violent and melodramatic. There's all those things, and then there's the mystery to do with him, such that people become fascinated by him. Because just think of the things that I've just said now. That makes him a fascinating figure. So he's not going to go away. Here's an interesting thing about it, that there were loads of these sort of conspiracy theories about Shakespeare. I'll just give you one. Now, the King James Version of the Bible, in the 46th Psalm, so Psalm 46, the 46th word is shake. And from the 46th word from the beginning is shake, and the 46th word from the end, if you count back from the end of that psalm, is spear.
Well, there you go.
And Shakespeare was 46 when that translation was made.
Well,
1610.
Coincidence.
It can't be that Shakespeare is in the Bible. Anyway,
well, there you go.
What I'm saying is that these sort of things grow up because he's become not only a real historical figure, but a mythological figure. We're not going to shake him off, I'll tell you.
Well, I don't want to get too blasphemous, but there was a period in time when actually Shakespeare disappeared. We know of a certain person who disappeared and came back. Okay.
There you go.
But actually, interestingly, Shakespeare on record disappeared between 1585 and 1592. There is absolutely no record of what he did during that period. I suspect that it may have been that, as the fact that communications were very poor then, that he probably went off on some other venture and decided to stop that venture and came back either to Stratford or possibly London. But what's interesting here is that, and I think this is quite clever of some of his own strategy, which was he was a very good wordsmith, not just because of the language of the day, but he actually invented his own words.
Yeah.
Now, I'll give you an example. So, for example, he actually came up with a number of terms or words. For example, lackluster, which came from As You Like It. In a pickle, note that when you're getting into trouble, from The Tempest. Wild Goose Chase, which is going off on the wrong tangent, which came from Romeo and Juliet. So there are many others which he brought out, like Eyeball, for example, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Sanctimonious from Measure for Measure. So what was quite clever was that if he felt that he ever reached a point in his script that perhaps the words of his day didn't evoke the right meaning or feeling, he would create his own. Now, of course, the idea of doing that today would seem, certainly at school, unacceptable. And yet that's something that he got away with. And yet, as you said earlier, we quote him extensively. But we not only do that in everyday life, we do it in business. I mean, some of the terms are, some of them I've already highlighted, just seem to get embedded in everything that we do. But is that a good thing now? I mean, is it time now that we should move on and perhaps start quoting someone else? What do you think?
Well, I think that we should include other people. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I don't think we can shake off Shakespeare, and I don't think we really want to. I mean, the English language is such a rich language and has been developed with Shakespeare as part of it. So why do we want to get rid of him? We don't, but it's a mistake to see him as the only great poet and the only great playwright of yore. I think we ought to be studying others as well, and let's bring in more modern playwrights who we can actually understand when we perform their plays. That's what I say.
I want to ask you one final question, which is a very simple one, because as you went through school and even in today, you sort of made some references to some of the influences of William Shakespeare. Where do you think England would be without William Shakespeare?
Well, this is where I think that we have to undermine the myth and say, look, if it hadn't been him, it would have been someone else. I don't think that Shakespeare was great in that sense. I think he was a clever wordsmith, but if he hadn't been there, either someone else or one of the other great playwrights of the time would have taken his place. I don't think he personally had a great genius, but that time of development of the language with that group of people was a great time. And the development of language that we see, that we still look back to today, is great, but it's not necessarily down to him. Basically, I think we wouldn't miss him, but things would be different, but not necessarily worse. They'd just be different.
So, listeners, what do you think about this? Do you have a different view? Do you see the work of the Bard as being masterpieces? Or maybe you've got a different view. Maybe you would like to shake off Shakespeare and hope he would go away. Well, why not drop us a line on markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts. So join us again next time for more topical topics with Mark and Pete.